For the first time in history, something like the full financial weight of the federal government is now aligned behind the clean energy transition. The 117th Congress of the United States, which sat from 2021 to 2022, passed a package of laws, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and most importantly, the Inflation Reduction Act, which represent a turning point in the politics of climate and clean energy policy in the United States, and the most significant acceleration of the nation's decarbonization efforts to date. Prior failed attempts at comprehensive federal climate policy focused primarily on carbon pricing to increase the private cost of climate pollution and shift economic incentives towards cleaner alternatives. In contrast, the successful legislative actions of the 117th Congress focus on making clean energy cheaper and represent a climate policy strategy centered on public investment, innovation, and industrial policy rather than carbon pricing and regulation. These successful laws thus represent a nascent climate industrial strategy and a sizable public investment to accelerate the clean energy transition, totaling well over $500 billion over the next 10 years, spread across virtually the entire suite of climate mitigation strategies and all major emitting sectors. The REPEAT project, which I lead, has modeled and analyzed the impacts of these bills and estimates that the Inflation Reduction Act and infrastructure law will roughly double the pace of U.S. decarbonization to about 4% per year for over the next decade. It will also reduce total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions to the neighborhood of 37 to 41% below peak levels by 2030. Despite this historic progress, this substantive acceleration of climate mitigation efforts still falls short of the United States target of reducing total greenhouse gas emissions to 50 to 52% below peak levels by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. Further action and accelerated progress are therefore required for the United States to get on the true pathway to net zero emissions. It's thus critical to stress that this climate industrial strategy is deliberately designed to reinforce feedbacks that have the potential to reshape the political economy of climate policy in the United States and to accelerate the clean energy transition. There are multiple channels by which these laws can facilitate accelerated mitigation efforts. First, by subsidizing the cost of clean energy and other climate solutions and building critical enabling infrastructure, these laws immediately make it cheaper and easier for all levels of government and voluntary private sector actors to increase their climate mitigation ambitions. Relatedly, the new laws also lower the cost of compliance for industries and households with any forthcoming federal state regulations, encouraging the promulgation of more stringent rules. Second, the laws are expected to drive down the real, unsubsidized cost of key climate mitigation technologies over time, including clean hydrogen and clean fuels, carbon capture and carbon dioxide removal, and advanced nuclear, geothermal, and long-duration energy storage, among others. Reducing the cost of these key climate mitigation technologies will not only make it easier to enact future U.S. policy, it will also spill over to lower the cost of mitigation for countries around the world, facilitating global decarbonization. Third, the laws can deliver real, tangible improvements in the quality of life and economic opportunities for communities around the country, which can reshape political constituencies and expand support for the clean energy transition. This includes robust support for the development of American manufacturing of solar, wind, battery, and electric vehicle components and assembly, as well as critical minerals processing. Incentives will also drive hundreds of billions of dollars in cumulative clean energy investment in communities historically reliant on fossil energy extraction, processing, or transportation for their economic livelihoods, giving these communities a new economic stake in the clean energy transition. The laws also deliver significant improvements in air quality and public health outcomes, particularly for environmentally overburdened communities. Fourth, the laws are likely to significantly strengthen concentrated clean energy interests. Over the next decade, Credit Suisse estimates that IRA will drive roughly $1.7 trillion in total clean energy spending, substantially expanding clean energy industries. The economic interests of these organized constituencies will be aligned behind the continuation of clean energy and climate policies, strengthening political coalitions for additional policy in the future while helping defend against retrenchment. Thus, the passage of the Infrastructure Law, CHIPS Act, and Inflation Reduction Act is likely to reflect a key acceleration of the so-called green spiral, or the policy sequencing feedbacks that can induce more ambitious policies and sustain and accelerate U.S. climate mitigation over time. Now, despite the historic progress represented by this trio of laws, their impact remains highly contingent and successful implementation and proactive efforts to overcome several key bottlenecks that could slow the pace of decarbonization. These laws primarily establish the financial incentives for accelerated climate progress, but they're far from a complete industrial strategy, nor do they instantly create the kind of state and institutional capacity required to successfully execute such a strategy. And unless proactively addressed, several rate-limiting constraints can also impede progress. These include the challenges of planning, siting, and permitting new infrastructure at record pace, training millions of new workers to staff the factory floors and build all this infrastructure, and efforts to transform and reorganize and expand supply chains to support these rapidly growing sectors while lessening the United States' dependence on factory China. If any of these elements proceeds too slowly, they could become critical constraints on the pace of decarbonization. The Inflation Reduction Act, along with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and CHIPS and Science Act, represent an historic inflection point for U.S. climate mitigation efforts. Yet as this period of federal policymaking closes, much work remains to be done to ensure we make the most of this contingent success.